Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt of all kinds. Wealth and income inequality runs rampant across America, and the middle class is all but disappeared. So what is Extraordinary America about? Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and descendants of immigrants awakening and unleashing the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through entrepreneurship and investing on the light side. It is about financial education, not only when it comes to money in the monetary systems, but also in regards to how to start a business, investing, especially when it comes to precious metals and real estate. In this podcast, I interview guests, many of whom came from humble beginnings, to see how they did it and how they attained financial freedom in their own lives and how they did business. And it is my hope that you will be inspired and you will want to awaken extraordinary within yourselves and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Welcome back to the show, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. For today's guest, we have Dr. David Gruder. Dr. David Gruder is a 12-time award-winning, multi-best-selling integrative psychologist and TEDx speaker who Radio TV Interview Report named America's Integrity Expert. He founded Integrity Revolution and the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty and hosts the Reimagining Humanity's Future and Yours show, in addition to co-hosting 2 podcasts. As a board chair level advisor, keynote speaker, trainer, and facilitator, Dr. Gruder equips leaders, influencers, executives, and concerned citizens worldwide with spiritually aligned inner mindsets and outer skills to make integrity profitable, society healthy, and governments capable of supporting personal self-sovereignty and societal well-being. Dr. Gruder's groundbreaking work revolves around catalyzing the next evolutionary leap in humanity's development from Homo sapiens to Homo spiritus. This version of our shared future incorporates timeless psycho-spiritual principles and integrates personal freedom and societal well-being to foster what he calls spiritual self-sovereignty that serves us all. He has been interviewed by media outlets such as Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur Magazine, and CBS Radio. He's certainly an extraordinary American, and I'm honored to have him on this show. Dr. David, are you there?
I'm here, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Dr. David, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. So, can you tell me and the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, your story, and how you got started?
Well, my gosh, there's a lot to the story about how I got started, but perhaps the most relevant to what we're going to be talking about is that when I was about 6 years old, give or take, I grew up in New York City. And so at that age, my parents took me to the United Nations in Manhattan. And I was, of course, I knew nothing about the politics or any of the shadow side of the United Nations. All I knew as a 6-year-old was that the vision was to unite humanity. And from that moment forward, in my bedroom, 2 flags flew. The United Nations flag to represent that I was a citizen of the world, and the United States flag to represent that I was a U.S. citizen and proud of it inside of being a citizen of the world.
Wow, that's awesome. Like I remember like taking a United Nations test when I was in school, and I had the same vision as well. Like all countries coming together because I'm an immigrant myself, and then I believe in the cross cultures of like different cultures coming. But Dr. David, what was your motivational factor in going into the career that you did? And like, what was the thing like from your childhood to your early adulthood that brought you to where you are today? Like, what was the motivation and all of that?
Well, I knew by the time I was 11 years old that I was called to have impact in the world, but I had no idea at that age, no clue about what that might be, except for a United Nations New Year's card that my family got around, give or take, the same time that I went to the United Nations for the first time. And the New Year's card said, the greater peace will only come after the smaller peace we make with each other. And that went straight into the core of my being at that young age. If we fast forward to when I was 15 years old, this is kind of a funny story. My parents sent me to Woodstock. They didn't know that what they were sending me to, because nobody knew what the Woodstock Festival in 1969 was really going to end up being beforehand. And I thought I was going there for the music because I was very involved in music and acting and performing growing up. And the reason I ended up going to that camp is, or to that, to Woodstock, was that I went to a camp in the summertime for the performing arts. And the spring of 69, the camp director sends this note home to all the parents saying, for the first time in the camp's history, we're going to have an optional field trip to a music and arts festival in upstate New York. Do you want to send your kids? So my parents naively send me. I thought, like I said, that I was going there for the music, and it was really over the moon. But what I couldn't have known beforehand, and what took me a while to unpack following my experience at Woodstock, was that I was actually there to have my entire worldview totally blown, totally expanded, totally transcended, really, because I started to understand the wisdom underneath the cliche from the 1960s that was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And the wisdom underneath that has informed my entire career. So I'll unpack that really briefly. The wisdom underneath the part of the cliche around sex in sex, drugs, and rock and roll was that in the 60s, we were looking for deeper ways to be bonded with each other than the expectation, the mere expectation of a marriage contract. And the drugs part was that we were looking for ways to be more fully who we were, more authentic, in contrast to the conformity that was installed in the United States and around the world subsequently during the 1950s. And the rock and roll part of sex, drugs, and rock and roll was that for the first time in the history of music, lyrics were appearing in songs that were telling us that we actually had the power to change the world for the better. And what that did was that it brought together for me what I have viewed as our three core drives as human beings: our drive to be who we truly are, authenticity, our drive to bond with others, connection, and our drive to influence the world around us, which is impact. So my work on this planet really revolves around integrating those three core drives, because authenticity is about me, connections about we, and impact is about us all. To me, that's what a whole self is 1/3 me, 1/3 we, and 1/3 us all.
So David, Dr. David, that's really interesting that you mentioned that because you know in today's society, what at least I notice and what others notice is that there's a lot of people are with the rise of technology, like people have become more isolated and they put up a front and they're not really authentic and they don't authentically connect with other people. They connect on Facebook or Instagram and all that stuff. But ironically, as we have become more technologically advanced, we have lost the true authenticness of connection. So what is your opinion on like how the world has changed in that regards?
Hmm. Well, a couple of things. One is that all innovation throughout the history of humanity has changed humanity in ways where initially humanity gets intoxicated with a new development and they kind of overuse it and they misuse it, and then over time hopefully develop right relationship with that. And the same is true in the work world, where there's a new innovation that comes around and it will cause certain jobs that have been available up until that time to disappear, and other jobs that nobody would have ever conceived of before that innovation to appear on the scene and become available to people. So, my attitude is that technology itself is neutral, and that what controls the use of technology is our state of consciousness. So technology can be used for the better or can be used for the worse. Kind of like my metaphor for that is Star Wars. So with Star Wars, you've got the
I love
Force.
Star Wars. Yeah.
Me too. So you've got the Force, and then you have the Jedi who are channeling the Force in ways that are supposed to elevate people and societies. And then you have the Sith, like Darth Vader, who are channeling the Force on behalf of sinister motivations. And so the Force is neutral, but in the hands of the Jedi, it's used for good. And in the hands of the Sith, it's used for ill.
No, I mean that's true, but like since you're like you've been called integrity expert, I wanted to ask you, right? So right now in our technologically advanced world, as we're going through this, a lot of people are. It seems like the world is becoming more and more immoral, and people are just doing what they want. So right now we are in a very dangerous time as a humanity as a whole because like we have like technology and we have all this advanced stuff like including nuclear bombs, but without the right morality and right spiritual principles, this can lead to the destruction of humanity altogether.
Yes, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
uh,
Uh,
so
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so like what I was going to ask you is like how do we as a collective go about becoming more having more integrity as a society altogether? Like what is the process? Like are we doing it at an individual level or is it happening more on a collective level?
Mm. Well, as a change specialist, I see the best and most useful and most durable change happening tactically from the top down and the bottom up simultaneously in integrated ways. But without a framework, without a frame of reference, nobody really knows what to do about that. So let me offer one way of understanding integrity that we can use as a guidepost for navigating an enlightened and elevated future for humanity rather than a deteriorated one. The first ingredient is for us to recognize and appreciate that we are social beings endowed with free will. And what that translates into, in terms of healthy individuals and healthy societies, is the endowed with free will part is about our personal freedom. It's about self-sovereignty. And the social beings part of that is that we thrive in groups, we thrive collectively. So collective or societal well-being plus individual freedom or self-sovereignty is the magic formula. And it's actually the formula that gave rise to the United States in the first place. Let me add just one more piece, and we can certainly double back to that if you want. But the last piece ties in with what I was saying earlier about our three core drives: authenticity, connection, and impact. Me, we, and us all. Well, authenticity is self integrity, it's being in integrity with myself. Connection is relationship integrity. It's being in integrity with the commitments that I make to the people that I love and work with and interact with. And impact, our impact core drive, our drive to make a positive difference in the world, is about collective integrity, being in integrity with the groups that we're part of, ranging from our families to our affinity groups, to our communities, to our faiths, to our country, to humanity, to planetary well-being. It's all nested loyalty or nested patriotism at the level of integrity with the groups that we're part of, because we're all part of multiple groups.
Mhm.
So it's that picture of integrity, integrity with our three core drives and integrity with us being designed as social beings endowed with free will. That gives us a framework for decision making about how to navigate humanity's future in a way that supports integrity and that makes integrity profitable in businesses.
No, totally. In fact, part of Exploring America itself was like no part of the reason I started Exploring America was like there's a thing about like doing business, and then there's like capitalism, which is there's like what I would call it Star Wars terms, dark side capitalism, and then there's like capitalism with morals, ethics, and values, where you do like a fair exchange or you do an abundance exchange and like things work out. It's like capitalism, like for instance, and like businesses get a bad name where businessmen where like people see them others doing criminal or partial exchange, and then that's what creates like the bad rap altogether. But basically what I noticed is that business is based on self-interest, and we have to create a kind of enlightened self-interest to basically create a healthy economy, and it has to be based on morals, ethics, and values. So that's part of the reason, that's part of the thing I started Exploring America for.
Yes. Well, that's the basis of conscious capitalism. And it's a version of capitalism that very sadly, very few people understand or know about because the version of capitalism that most people have been exposed to and think about and talk about is the dark side capitalism, what I call sociopathic capitalism. And if they think that that's what capitalism is, then they're missing the forest for the trees because that's only one version of capitalism. And you're right, that is Sith capitalism, going back to the Star Wars metaphor.
Yeah. And David, so like yeah, you talk about conscious capitalism. So like for the audience, can you is there like a particular difference between conscious capitalism and Andrew Yang's human-centered capitalism? Because like there's like a capitalism, like there's a different version of capitalism coming out where some people are saying like it should be based on a human-centered approach, and others are talking about conscious capitalism. So in your opinion, what would be like, are they the same, or is there like subtle differences between the two?
I view them as variations on the original version of corporate social responsibility that emerged in the late 1990s, which referred to something called the triple bottom line of profitability. And the triple bottom line was people, planet, profit, meaning that what we produce, what we sell, has to be good for the people who are working for us, has to be helpful and good and positive for our customers or clients. The planet part is that what we're providing is not harming society, humanity, or the planet's own well-being, and profit being that we're still being profitable in the things that we're bringing to the marketplace. That triple bottom line is the cornerstone of socially responsible capitalism, conscious capitalism. They're all variations on a theme.
No, I mean you're right about that. It's just that like a lot of people they hear capitalism and it's like a negative term to them, but re in reality, like it's a necessary thing because like that's how humanity does exchange, and like as long as you have an abundance exchange and you're caring about people, like it's not as you would say like sociopathic capitalism, and like people need to know the difference between the two, you know. Um,
Absolutely.
So, Dr. David, I know you wrote this ebook called Hijacking Humanity. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about the premise of this book and what it's about?
Sure. The way I see it is that especially since the 1950s, and what I'm about to say really started before then, but just to start in the relatively recent past, starting in the 1950s, we were we had our notions of well-being and happiness that the United States was founded on replaced by a faulty happiness formula. And out of that faulty happiness formula, a number of other formulas emerged. So the hijacking of humanity is about the spells that we're under individually and collectively. And of those spells that I see humanity being under individually and collectively, there are five that are the most common that I've seen. The first is a faulty happiness formula. The second is a faulty health formula. The third is a faulty prosperity formula. The fourth is a faulty patriotism formula. And the fifth is a faulty problem solving formula. So those five faulty formulas have collectively, from my perspective, hijacked humanity into a profoundly deteriorated state that if we're going to transcend, if we're going to emerge into our next elevated species of humanity, we got to get back on track. We got to wake up from those big five spells around happiness, health, prosperity, patriotism, and problem solving.
Wow. David, I wanted to like elaborate more on this thing because you talk about faulty happiness formula, right? And then the American identity itself is about the pursuit of happiness. So from your perspective, what do you think are Americans doing that is going away from the pursuit of happiness, and like how can they have a correct formula for happiness in your perspective?
Sure. Well, starting off with the version of happiness that was articulated in the United States Declaration of Independence and Constitution, happiness, the pursuit of happiness, is made possible by integrating or dealing with the inherent seeming tensions between personal freedom and the common good, self-sovereignty and societal well-being. And when we're operating at that intersection, happiness is possible because we are social beings endowed with free will. So the happiness formula, if it doesn't include both of those elements, there cannot be an effective pursuit of happiness. So our founders, the founders of the United States, understood that really well. A lot of people don't even know that the United States has a mission statement because it's not called a mission statement. It's called the preamble to the United States Constitution. Even though it's called the preamble, it is America's mission statement. And the mission statement is basically about creating a society that operates at the intersection of preserving personal freedom and promoting the common good, self sovereignty, and collective well being, and mandates the government to be a servant to its citizens and to that version of the pursuit of happiness, not a servant to special interests or to itself.
It's interesting that you say that like about like the collective good versus the personal freedoms, right? Like individual versus collective. Because right now, as you notice in America, right, there's been a divide for like about for a long time now, and most Americans I think are basically losing hope in like attaining that state of happiness on a national level because there's all of these divisions, and there's like what is called identity grouping and grouping of identities. And personally, I think that that is against the attainment or pursuit of happiness because you have to have a certain level of empathy for the other person in order to have a state of collective good. But I don't, what would be your opinion on that?
Yes, I agree. And what you're referring to right now is very related to the hijacking of patriotism because um, the way I look at patriotism is the way through the image of Ukrainian nested dolls. You know, these dolls where you have well, they're often paper mache, but you have something that looks like a doll, and the head comes off, and inside that doll is an identical doll, smaller, and inside that doll is an identical doll, but smaller still. etc. That's what I mean by nested patriotism. When I make my uh, group's identity more important than my country's identity, or if I make my country's identity more important than humanity, or if I make my own self more important than the groups that I'm in, then we've got things way, way out of whack. And I consider the fundamental polarization and divisiveness in this country, in the United States today, to actually be an expression of a polarized belief that on one side of it, people are insisting that personal freedom is more important than societal well-being. And on the other side, people are insisting that societal well-being is more important than self-sovereignty. And both of those groups are equally and oppositely insane because they are in violation of the country's founding vision, and they don't even know it.
Wow. No, I mean it's true, right? Because like it's become extremes on both sides, but ultimately it's about a balance, and it's about going back to the vision of the nation, which I think we've gone away from, and that's what's creating a lot of the issues. But
Yes.
David, connected to this, I know you had a TEDx talk where you talked about the hijacking of the American dream. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that, and what do you mean by the American dream being hijacked?
Mm. Yes, I'm happy to do that. The the where I'll pick up in the story is in 1947. In 1947, World War II had just ended, and Harry Truman was president of the United States. And when he became president, he was vice president under Franklin Delano Roosevelt when Roosevelt died. So when Roosevelt died, he became president. And he had two overriding concerns in the aftermath of World War II. Number one, he knew that the United States economy had gotten rejuvenated. It had come roaring back as a result of war. So it was World War II that helped the United States recover from the Great Depression. And he wanted the economy to be able to continue to grow in peacetime rather than the economy being dependent on war in order to keep growing. That was his first concern. His second concern was that he wanted to make sure that the chances that what happened in Nazi Germany could happen here in the United States would be minimized to the greatest extent possible. Now, why was he concerned about that? Very simple answer. Because the Nazi propaganda campaigns that were so effective at destroying sanity in Germany for a period of time were fashioned by the Nazi minister of propaganda, Herr Joseph Goebbels, based on his reading of the published works of an American by the name of Edward Bernays.
Oh, I
And yeah, go ahead.
no, I actually read that book, and I actually know about that story, like where Goebbels got it from him. It was yeah, but go ahead.
So that's why Truman was worried because Edward Bernays was the darling of politics and business through most of his life. I mean, Bernays was an advisor to virtually every American president, both Republican and Democrat, from Woodrow Wilson at the end of World War I all the way through when Edward Bernays died in the 1990s during Bill Clinton's presidency. So he was a darling of politics and he was a darling of the business world. So he had a lot of clout and a lot of credibility in the United States among people of power. And that's why Truman was worried because if Bernays's material could get hijacked into creating Nazi Germany, then he realized it could happen here too. So what Truman did was that he assembled a group of politicians and business people and charged them with the responsibility of coming up with a plan that would simultaneously keep the economy growing in peacetime and minimize the chances that what happened in Nazi Germany would happen here. What did they hatch? They hatched something that they called the American Dream, and their version of the American dream was installed initially in the United States in the 1950s. And because of the position and the credibility that the United States had around the world at that point in time, or at least through much of the world, the rest of the world followed, and they adopted this delusion of an American dream. And what the American dream 1950s style um, did is that it completely twisted the pursuit of happiness. I don't know that they did it on purpose because they were trying to address two understandable concerns. But what they did was they redefined happiness as excessive consumerism. They redefined personal freedom as conformity to a specific version of the good life that had to do with owning your own house with a white picket fence and the 1.8 children. I'm being facetious there, of course, and the latest consumer gadgets and the vacations and all of this stuff. And if you didn't have all of those things, then you were being un-American and you weren't going to be happy. And so the other side of the formula, the original formula for the pursuit of happiness, was the collective well-being side, the common good side. And in place of that, we had overwork. So in order to fund this delusion of happiness based on excessive consumerism, the breadwinner in the family, or breadwinners in the family, had to work longer and longer hours in jobs they weren't necessarily passionate about, for companies whose values they didn't necessarily agree with, in order to climb the corporate ladder to make more and more money. And still, no matter how much money they made, there was a gap between the amount of money they needed in order to live this version, the 1950s version of the American dream, and the amount of money they were making, which caused consumer debt to start skyrocketing. And that's when capitalism got replaced with a different form of economy that is still unfortunately mislabeled capitalism, but it's actually debtism, which is borrowing against an uncertain future in order to prop up the appearance of a lifestyle in the here and now, in the present, because that's what we were told was going to make us happy.
Dr. David, you just blew my mind right here because that is the entire mission. That is like the central mission of Extraordinary America, is to basically get people to be financially free from debt and to understand that happiness doesn't come from consumerism and materialism. It comes from within. And you got to use your finances in a way that leads you to a greater freedom. And now I'm from what you're telling me, it was sanctioned by Truman in the like all those years back. Wow, this is just
Yes. Yes. And the thing that shouldn't be lost in this story is it was sanctioned by Truman because he had these two noble concerns. He wanted the economy to keep growing in peacetime, and he wanted to minimize the chances that what happened in Nazi Germany would happen here in the United States. So this is an example of the best intentions laying the pathway to hell.
wow. This is like I kind of knew this, but I didn't know the story behind how the American dream became the white picket fence with 1.8 children and all of that. So, Dr. David, so now that we know this, and Extraordinary America is all about people finding the right pursuit of happiness and becoming debt free and all that. What do you think is the right solution to going about the pursuit of happiness and going about the American dream for Americans?
Mhm. Well, I view us as being at a crossroads right now. I don't know. I'm not thoroughly convinced that we've hit bottom yet. There's an old saying that mostly people change not because they see the light, but because they feel the heat. And unfortunately, what's true of individuals is true of societies too. Mostly societies don't change because they see the light, but because they feel the heat. So things might have to get worse than they already are before a critical mass of society wakes up enough to make the shift. I don't know. I'm not a foreseer of the future in terms of how long it's going to take or how bad things need to get for the pivot to occur. But I am very confident that we will pivot before we finish self-destructing if we understand that there are two versions for our future as a species and as Americans. And these two versions I'm about to describe are um, basically in, if you will, in a sense, in competition with each other, only in the sense that it's unclear about which of these two versions is going to prevail. Although I think that I've put my money on one of these two versions, the better of them, in my opinion. So the two versions of humanity's future, one is where we are turned into 21st century serfs, slaves, chattel, commodities, where we become this bizarre hybrid between biology and cybernetics, and where we are being dictated to by a nanny state, by a government that is telling us how to think, what to choose, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, how to view various issues, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, the massive erosion of self-sovereignty in service of um, this delusion that our collective well-being is more important than self-sovereignty rather than equally important
So
to
basically,
self-sovereignty.
so basically like a 1984 George Orwell's version of a dystopia then.
You got it. That's exactly right.
But with
1984, Brave New World, Lord of the Flies. I mean, yes, there have been all these warnings long ago by science fiction authors who warned us that this was a possible alternative future for humanity and warned us that it wasn't going to go well if that future emerged. I call that future. So, Homo sapiens is the species we've been until now. And from my perspective, the species of humanity called Homo sapiens is over. That species has ended. And one of two species is going to prevail from here forward. One version that I just described, I call Homo machina, human machines.
what?
Mhm. And the other version I call Homo spiritus, which is human spirits, where we are conduits of higher love and wisdom in the physical universe. Whereas with Homo machina, we have the arrogant audacity to decide that we are smarter than higher love and wisdom. So a small group of people are entitled to dictate to all of us what our lives are supposed to be like. That's Homo machina. Homo spiritus lives at the intersection of spiritual self-sovereignty and serving us all collective well-being.
Dr. David, I personally am a believer of like self-realization and attaining God level consciousness through yoga meditation. So in my mind, Homo spiritus has to win because the other one that you talked about, that's unthinkable to me, you know? And here's the thing, like a lot of people saying right now that cryptocurrency and like they're going to use blockchain technology to enslave us, and they're planning to have like on a national level, like a national cryptocurrency, and they can track everything. And this is going to be the beginning of like the so-called serfdom. And then a lot of people are thinking that this is where technology is going to lead us to, you know?
Yes, I'm very aware of the debate about that and the debates around artificial intelligence. But the thing about blockchain is that again, it like all technology, it is neutral. The beauty, at least potential beauty of blockchain is that blockchain is constructed in such a way that it is capable of enabling each one of us to have financial self-sovereignty and not be controlled by a nanny state or by Big Brother or by authoritarian controllers. Um, can blockchain be abused to try to control humanity? Oh, no question about it. But blockchain's innovation is unbelievable because it gives humanity, for the first time in its history, the first authentic opportunity to have financial self-sovereignty where we aren't beholden to banks or to world economic systems in order to be the holders of the converted life energy of ours that we've converted into money and other assets.
No, I mean, totally. Like, I do hope that blockchain will be used to give greater freedom, but like the state at which we're going, like, so in order for all of this to happen, a percentage of the population, in my opinion, has to have integrity, and they have to have the greater good of other people. Like, if we have what I call narcissism, right? If we have a great swath of the population being narcissistic and self-centered, that automatically filters to our politicians, and we're going to end up with fascism. It starts from the bottom up, and then it goes all the way to the top. But that's just like my opinion.
I happen to agree with you, and what I'll offer about that is freedom, personal freedom, self-sovereignty without the common good, without societal well-being is narcissism, and societal well-being without self-sovereignty is tyranny. It's got to be both and. The founders of this country knew that when they first founded this country, which is why this country's basic pillars are preserving personal freedom and promoting the common good. And if we choose as a country to forget that, then we will have abdicated our sacred responsibility as light bringers to the planet around what enlightened governance and enlightened societies are meant to be like.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. So, Dr. Deer, can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty and the premise of it and how you started it and all of that?
Sure. Well, you know, I go all the way back to Woodstock again because I emerged from Woodstock with the beginnings of an idea about what I was supposed to do to have positive impact in the world after, as I said earlier, having had a glimpse at around age 12 that I was supposed to have positive impact, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. Well, as we're recording this episode, I am a little over a month away from turning 70 years old. And so I have the advantage of 2020 hindsight over the course of decades. And I realize in looking over the arc of my lifetime that my experiences and my professional capabilities have groomed me and prepared me to be a visionary leader who offers a framework, an integrated framework for individuals and groups to create spiritual self-sovereignty that serves us all for themselves and for the groups that they're part of and for the parts of society that each of them are individually called to have positive impact in their own unique ways. So the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty is a combination of supportive community, mutually supportive community, plus training in how to embody spiritual self-sovereignty that serves us all, and training in how to facilitate that in the groups that they're part of. So it's a movement.
That is amazing, Dr. David. And I would definitely want my audience to know more about this so that we can create a better world for this, not only for our nation, but for this planet as well. So, Dr. David, is there any of the projects that you're doing right now other than this that you'd want the audience to get a glimpse into?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do I do wear multiple hats. And so one of the other main hats that I wear is as a trusted advisor and trainer and mentor and facilitator in businesses. And what I do in the business world is I make integrity profitable by helping businesses translate their high intentions into step-by-step procedures that are psychologically savvy. Because here's the thing that most people in who are experienced in the business world know, but they don't know what to do about, which is that well, let me put it this way, leaders of businesses build businesses at the level of their self-development limitations, despite their highest intentions. And so the work that I do in businesses is around the psychological side of business success, executive development, C-suite health, the collective health of the executive suite in a company, culture architecture, brand integrity, all of those kinds of things that combine to make integrity profitable. I work with the psychological end of what makes impact-oriented, socially responsible businesses profitable.
That is awesome, Dr. David. And so, Dr. David, how can our audience connect with you and get to know more about you and your work?
Sure. There are a couple of ways. If you're interested at the business end of things, you can get a hold anywhere of my two most recent business books, The Nimble C-Suite and The Nimble Company. And you can find out about those, and you can find out about the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty and all of the other hats that I wear and things that I'm involved with, including the podcasts that I co-host and the show that I have and things like that, through my main website, which is drgruder.com, spelled DR for doctor, DRGRUDER.com. At drgruder.com, you can click on any of the things that I'm involved with that are of interest to or useful to you. And you also have a way to be in touch with me.
Thank you, Dr. David. We really appreciate that, and I am honored to have that you took the time to do this show with me and share your wisdom with all of us. Like I really appreciate that, and I would definitely want to have you on this show at a later time.
Well, thank you. It'll be my joy to return. Obviously, I think it's clear to both of us that the work that you're doing on this show and my mission are very aligned and very overlapping. So I'm happy for us to support each other this way.
This show is definitely pro homo spiritus. I don't want the other side because we definitely want to create a spiritually better place. So
Yeah.
yeah. I want to conclude the show by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. It's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey there, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets you free. Also, remember that your purchasing power is being diluted through inflation, and then the practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power by investing in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Also, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.